The shot rang out through the saloon, silencing every patron as blood bloomed across Sheriff Parker's chest. Beside him, Sophia Vale clutched her father's letter, the document that would change her life forever, while dust from the Arizona territory swirled through the open doorway like a premonition. Sophia had arrived in Whispering Creek just 3 days ago to claim her inheritance, her late father's modest ranch and crushing debt. Now the town's crooked mayor was making his position abundantly clear. Either she'd relinquish her claim to the valuable land, or she'd meet the same fate as the sheriff who'd tried to protect her legal rights. "You've got till sundown tomorrow, Miss Vale," Mayor Holbrook drawled, nodding to his gunman. "Either sign over the deed or find yourself in a pine box beside your pa." As they left, Sophia knelt beside the dying sheriff, her violet dress pooling around her. "What do I do now?" she whispered. Sheriff Parker gripped her hand with fading strength. "Find Xavier Stone," he gasped. "Tell him I'm calling in my favor." Those were the last words he spoke before his eyes went still, leaving Sophia alone in a town full of enemies with only a name as her salvation. The year was 1875, and Sophia Vale was about to discover just how lawless the West could be, and just how unexpected the path to safety might become. The journey to find Xavier Stone began immediately. With shaking hands, Sophia gathered what little she had and slipped out the back of the saloon. The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty Main Street as she hurried toward the livery stable, constantly glancing over her shoulder. "Excuse me," she asked the stable hand, a gangly youth of no more than 16. "I need to find a man named Xavier Stone. Do you know where I might locate him?" The boy's eyes widened. "Stone, madam, you don't want to be mixin' with his sort, please," Sophia insisted. "Sheriff Parker sent me to him with his dying breath." The stable hand scratched his head. "Well, if the sheriff sent you, Stone's got a cabin up in Coyote Canyon. 'Bout half a day's ride north. But he ain't friendly to visitors, especially not city folk." "I'm not from the city," Sophia replied, though her accent and attire certainly suggested otherwise. She'd come from Boston just weeks ago after receiving word of her father's death. "And I don't have a choice." 20 minutes later, she was riding north on a borrowed mare, her meager possessions in a single bag. The sheriff's blood still stained her gloves, which she couldn't bring herself to discard. They were evidence of Mayor Holbrook's crime, not that law seemed to matter much in this territory. The landscape grew increasingly rugged as she rode. Towering red mesas and scraggly juniper trees dotted the horizon. By the time the sun began to set, Sophia was lost, frightened, and questioning her decision to seek out this mysterious man. That's when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats behind her. 3 riders closing fast. "There she is," a voice called out. "The Vale girl." Sophia dug her heels into her mare's sides, urging the tired animal faster. The canyon ahead offered her only hope of escape, its narrow entrance possibly providing cover. As she galloped toward it, a gunshot cracked the air. Her mare screamed and stumbled, throwing Sophia from the saddle. She hit the ground hard, the air knocked from her lungs. Through dazed vision, she saw the 3 riders approaching Mayor Holbrook's men, no doubt. As they dismounted, Sophia scrambled backward, searching desperately for a weapon, a hiding place, anything. "Now, Miss Vale," the leader said, "you've caused the mayor considerable inconvenience." He drew his pistol. "We were told to bring you back, but accidents happen out here all the time." As he raised his gun, another shot exploded from somewhere above them. The leader jerked backward, clutching his shoulder as he fell. The other 2 men drew their weapons, firing wildly at the canyon walls. A figure dropped from the rocks above a tall man wielding a Winchester rifle with deadly precision. 2 more shots, and the mayor's men were scrambling back to their horses, dragging their wounded leader. "This ain't over," one shouted as they retreated. Sophia's rescuer stood silhouetted against the setting sun, his face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He approached cautiously, rifle still ready. "You Sophia Vale?" he asked, his voice a rough rasp. She nodded, unable to find her voice. I'm Xavier Stone, he said, and you're trespassing on my land. In the fading light, Sophia finally saw him clearly, a man perhaps 30 years of age, with a face weathered by sun and hardship. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, and several days' worth of stubble darkened his features. His eyes, though they were startlingly blue against his tanned skin, and they studied her with undisguised suspicion. Sheriff Parker, she managed. He told me to find you before he died. Something flickered in Stone's expression. Parker's dead, Mayor Holbrook's man shot him in cold blood. Right in front of me. Xavier Stone was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed deeply, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Your horse is lame, he said. Mine's just up the ridge, come on. He extended a calloused hand. After a moment's hesitation, Sophia took it, allowing him to pull her to her feet. The sheriff said you owed him a favor, she said. Xavier's jaw tightened. Parker saved my life once, kept me from hanging for something I didn't do. He looked at her with renewed intensity. What exactly did he ask me to do for you, Miss Vale? Sophia swallowed hard. He didn't say. He only had time to tell me to find you before he died. Xavier Stone shook his head. Well, I can't leave you out here for those vultures to find. He gestured toward the canyon. My cabin's about a mile up. You can stay the night, and tomorrow I'll take you to the next town over. Holbrook's reach doesn't extend that far. I can't leave, Sophia protested. My father's ranch. Your father was Jonathan Vale, Xavier interrupted, surprising her. You knew him. Not personally, but I know the land. Good water rights, strategic location. He studied her face. That's why Holbrook wants it. He's been buying up every piece of property between here and the railroad survey lines. Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Then you understand why I can't run. That ranch is all I have left of my father. Xavier sighed. Look, Miss Vale, I'm sorry about your father and the sheriff, but I'm no knight in shining armor. I mind my own business up here for a reason. He gestured to his scarred face. Last time I got involved in Whispering Creek's politics, I nearly lost my head. Please, Sophia said, her voice steady despite her fear. I have nowhere else to turn. Those blue eyes studied her again, weighing, judging. Finally, Xavier nodded once. One night. Then we figure out how to get you safely away from here. It wasn't what she wanted to hear, but it was better than being left alone in the wilderness. Sophia followed him up the narrow canyon trail, wondering if she had just traded one danger for another. Xavier Stone's cabin was more substantial than Sophia had expected, a sturdy two-room structure built against the canyon wall, partially concealed by the surrounding rock formations. A small corral held a magnificent black stallion that nickered softly as they approached. Home sweet home, Xavier said without enthusiasm, dismounting and offering Sophia a hand down. It's not much, but it's defensible. The interior was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a roughly made table and two chairs nearby. A bookshelf surprised her. It was filled with volumes that seemed out of place in this rugged setting. Shakespeare, Whitman, and several history texts. You read, she observed. A man's got to do something during the long winters, he replied, setting his rifle aside and lighting an oil lamp. Sit. You look like you're about to collapse. Sophia sank gratefully into a chair while Xavier moved with practiced efficiency, building a fire and setting a pot of coffee to boil. She watched his movements. They were precise, economical, like those of a man accustomed to being alone. How long have you lived here? She asked. 5 years, since the incident. The incident that gave you that scar. His hand unconsciously touched his face. The same. Mayor Holbrook decided he wanted my family's land. When my father refused to sell, there was a dispute. My parents didn't survive it. I barely did. His voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather rather than the murder of his family. I'm so sorry, Sophia whispered. Xavier shrugged. It was a long time ago, and Sheriff Parker saved you from hanging. Holbrook claimed I killed my own parents. Parker knew better. He helped me escape, told me to hide up here until he could prove my innocence. A bitter smile crossed his face. 5 years later, I'm still waiting. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed one to Sophia. Your turn. Why are you out here alone, tangling with the most dangerous man in the territory? Sophia warmed her hands around the cup. My father wrote to me 3 months ago asking me to come to Arizona. He'd been ill and wanted to see me before. She swallowed hard. By the time I arrived, he was already gone. The lawyer in town said he'd left me the ranch, but also considerable debts. Mayor Holbrook offered to buy the property for a fraction of its worth, enough to cover the debts, but nothing more. And you refused. The ranch was my father's dream. I couldn't just give it away, especially not after I found his journals. She reached into her bag and withdrew a leather-bound book. He discovered something on the property, something valuable enough that he believed it would secure my future. He didn't specify what it was, only that it was hidden somewhere on the ranch. Xavier's eyes narrowed. Something valuable enough for Holbrook to commit murder? Apparently. Sophia took a sip of the strong coffee. Sheriff Parker was helping me search through my father's papers when Mayor Holbrook and his gunmen came into the saloon. The sheriff told them I wasn't selling, and her voice caught. They shot him without warning, right in front of everyone, and no one did a thing to stop it. That's Whispering Creek for you, Xavier said grimly. Holbrook owns the town, lock and stock. What am I going to do? Sophia asked, the reality of her situation finally overwhelming her. They'll kill me if I go back. Xavier was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. Get some rest, he finally said. You can take the bed in there. He nodded toward the second room. I'll sleep out here, and tomorrow we'll figure something out. He didn't sound convinced. Sleep came fitfully to Sophia that night. Strange sounds from the canyon and the enormity of her predicament kept her tossing and turning. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of Sheriff Parker's blood pooling across the saloon floor, of her father's face, of Xavier Stone's scarred visage watching her from the shadows. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Dawn light filtered through the cabin's single window. For a moment, Sophia was disoriented, but then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She smoothed her rumpled dress as best she could and stepped into the main room. Xavier stood at the fireplace, tending to a cast iron skillet. He'd shaved, she noticed, and changed into a clean shirt. The effect somewhat softened his intimidating appearance, though the scar remained a stark reminder of his violent past. You're up, he said, glancing her way. Breakfast is almost ready. Thank you, Sophia replied, awkwardly aware that she was imposing on this solitary man's carefully constructed isolation. I appreciate your hospitality. He grunted in response, dishing up bacon and beans onto 2 tin plates. Eat, we need to talk. They sat at the rough table, and Sophia found herself surprisingly hungry despite her circumstances. The food was simple but filling, and Xavier had made real coffee, not the chicory substitute so common in these parts. I've been thinking about your situation, Xavier said after they'd eaten in silence for several minutes. There's really only one solution that keeps you alive and keeps your father's property. What's that? Sophia asked, hope rising. Marriage. She nearly choked on her coffee. I beg your pardon, territorial law, Xavier explained as if discussing the weather. A widow can't be forced to pay her husband's debts immediately. There's a grace period of 1 year, and if the husband dies without other heirs, his property belongs solely to his widow. Sophia stared at him. Are you suggesting I find someone to marry and then, what, hope he dies? No, Xavier met her gaze steadily. I'm suggesting you marry me, today, on paper only, he added quickly, seeing her expression. It would legally protect your ranch from Holbrook until we figure out what your father found. That's absurd, Sophia sputtered. We're complete strangers, which is why it would be on paper only, he repeated. A business arrangement, you get protection under the law, I get. He paused. What do you get, Mr. Stone? His blue eyes hardened. A chance to finally bring down the man who murdered my family. Sophia set down her fork. You're serious. Dead serious. Holbrook's had this coming for a long time. Your father's discovery, whatever it is, might be the key to exposing him. Xavier leaned forward. The law in these parts may be corrupt, but it still exists. If we can prove Holbrook's crimes the murders, the land grabs the territorial governor would have to act. And this requires marriage because otherwise you'll be dead by sunset, Xavier said bluntly. Holbrook won't wait, and I gave Parker my word I'd help you. You don't even know me, Sophia protested weakly. I know enough. You could have signed over that ranch and gone back east with some money in your pocket. Instead, you're risking your life for your father's dream and for justice. His scarred face softened slightly. Those are principles worth standing for. Sophia took a deep breath, weighing her limited options. If we did this paper marriage, what would happen afterward? Once Holbrook is dealt with, annulment, Xavier said promptly. I have no interest in being anyone's husband for real. I chose this life of solitude. It was madness, complete madness. Yet as Sophia considered the alternatives, fleeing penniless or staying to face certain death, Xavier's proposal began to seem like the only viable choice. How would we even find someone to perform the ceremony? She asked. We can't exactly walk into Whispering Creek and ask the preacher. For the first time, a genuine smile crossed Xavier's face. It transformed him, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. As it happens, there's a circuit judge passing through Copper Gulch today, the next town over. He's an honest man, from what I hear. If we leave now, we can be there by noon. Sophia stood, her mind racing with the implications of what she was considering. I must be losing my mind, she murmured. No, Xavier said, rising as well. You're fighting to survive out here. That's the only sanity that matters. 2 hours later, they were riding double on Xavier's powerful black stallion, following a narrow trail through the rugged landscape. Sophia sat behind Xavier, acutely aware of his solid presence as she held onto his waist. They had barely spoken since leaving the cabin, both seemingly absorbed in the enormity of what they were about to do. Copper Gulch turned out to be little more than a cluster of weathered buildings surrounding a dusty crossroads. Unlike Whispering Creek's false gentility, this town made no pretenses about its rough nature. Miners, cowboys, and various frontier types milled about the single street. The judge should be at the hotel, Xavier said, dismounting outside a 2-story building optimistically named the Grand Palace. He helped Sophia down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Inside, they found Judge Abernathy holding court in the hotel's small dining room. He was a corpulent man with shrewd eyes and a magnificent white beard that spread across his chest like a cloud. Stone, the judge acknowledged Xavier with a nod. Heard you were still in these parts. His eyes shifted to Sophia. And who might this young lady be? Sophia Vale, she answered, extending her hand. Pleased to meet you, Your Honor. The judge's bushy eyebrows rose at her refined accent. Vale, any relation to Jonathan Vale, his daughter? Ah, understanding dawned in the judge's eyes. I heard about his passing. My condolences. Xavier stepped forward. Judge, we need your help. We'd like you to marry us today. The judge's eyebrows climbed even higher. Is that so? He looked from Xavier to Sophia and back again. This seems sudden. It's complicated, Xavier admitted. Mayor Holbrook is trying to force me off my father's land, Sophia explained, deciding that honesty, or at least partial honesty, was the best approach. He had Sheriff Parker killed yesterday when he tried to help me. Judge Abernathy's expression darkened. Parker's dead. Good Lord. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. And you think marriage will solve your problems? It will give us time, Xavier said. Under territorial law, I know the law, son, the judge interrupted. Better than most. He studied them both for a long moment. This isn't how marriage is meant to be entered into. We understand that, Sophia said, but these are desperate circumstances. The judge sighed deeply. I've known Holbrook for years, never trusted the man. He seemed to come to a decision. Very well, I'll perform the ceremony. But, he added, raising a finger, I want it understood that this is a real, legal marriage in the eyes of the law. Whatever your private arrangement may be is your business. Thank you, Judge, Xavier said, relief evident in his voice. Don't thank me yet, Abernathy replied gruffly. You'll need witnesses and a license. An hour later, with a hastily procured marriage license and 2 bemused minors as witnesses, Sophia Vale became Sophia Stone in a brief ceremony in Judge Abernathy's hotel room. The judge's words about honoring and cherishing each other seemed almost farcical given the circumstances, but Sophia repeated her vows clearly, as did Xavier. By the power vested in me by the Arizona Territory, I now pronounce you man and wife, the judge concluded. You may kiss the bride. There was an awkward pause. Sophia hadn't considered this part. Xavier seemed equally taken aback. Then, with a slight shrug, he leaned forward and pressed his lips briefly to hers, a chaste, perfunctory kiss that nonetheless sent an unexpected warmth through Sophia's body. Well, that's done, Xavier said gruffly as they signed the marriage certificate. Thank you, Judge. I hope you know what you're doing, Abernathy replied, handing the document to Sophia. Keep that safe. It's your shield against Holbrook for now. As they left the hotel, Xavier seemed distracted, scanning the street with narrowed eyes. What is it? Sophia asked. We've been here too long, he said quietly. News travels fast. We need to move. They mounted Xavier's stallion and rode out of town, but instead of returning the way they had come, Xavier took a different trail, one that wound south toward Whispering Creek. Where are we going? Sophia asked, alarmed. We can't go back to town. We're not going into town, Xavier replied. We're going to your ranch. If your father hid something valuable there, we need to find it before Holbrook does. But his men will be watching the property. Probably, Xavier agreed, but they won't be expecting you to return with a husband, and they certainly won't be expecting me. As they rode, Xavier explained his plan. They would approach the Vale Ranch after dark, using the back trails he knew from his hunting expeditions. With luck, they could search the property undetected. If they were discovered, the marriage certificate would provide legal protection, at least temporarily. Holbrook won't risk openly defying territorial law, Xavier said. He operates in the shadows. He'll try to find a way around our marriage, but it will take him time. Time we can use to find whatever my father discovered, Sophia concluded. Exactly. The sun was setting by the time they reached the outskirts of the Vale property. From their vantage point on a ridge, they could see the small ranch house and barn in the valley below. A single lamp burned in the house window. Someone's there, Xavier murmured, dismounting and helping Sophia down. Holbrook's men, most likely. Xavier tied his horse to a juniper tree. We'll wait until full dark, then circle around to the back of the property. As night fell, Sophia became increasingly aware of her strange situation. 24 hours ago, she'd been a single woman determined to claim her inheritance. Now she was legally married to a scarred recluse she barely knew, about to sneak onto her own property like a thief. You're shivering, Xavier observed. Just nervous, Sophia admitted. The night had grown cool, but it was anxiety, not cold, that caused her trembling. Xavier hesitated, then awkwardly put an arm around her shoulders. We'll get through this, he said, his voice low. I promised Parker I'd help you, and I keep my promises. Sophia found herself leaning into his warmth. Thank you, she whispered. For a moment, they stood together under the desert stars, 2 strangers bound by circumstance and a hastily spoken vow. Then Xavier pulled away, his expression unreadable in the darkness. It's time, he said. Follow me and stay quiet. They moved like shadows down the ridge, Xavier leading them through the scrubby vegetation with the sure-footedness of someone intimately familiar with the terrain. As they neared the ranch house, Sophia's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. The back door of the house was unlocked, a carelessness that suggested Holbrook's men felt secure in their occupation of the property. Xavier eased it open, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. They slipped inside, finding themselves in the kitchen. Voices drifted from the front room. 2 men, from the sound of it, engaged in a card game. Xavier put a finger to his lips. then gestured for Sophia to follow him down a narrow hallway. Her father's bedroom was untouched, as if the intruders had respected the sanctity of a dead man's personal space, or perhaps they simply hadn't found anything of value there. Xavier closed the door softly behind them. "Where would your father hide something important?" he whispered. Sophia looked around the sparse room, a bed, a dresser, a small writing desk. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I barely knew this place. Father only bought it 2 years ago, after I was already back east at school." Xavier methodically began searching, checking under the mattress, behind drawers, beneath floorboards. Sophia joined him, running her hands along the walls, looking for any irregularity that might indicate a hiding place. It was Sophia who found a small notch in the wooden floor beneath the corner of the rug, barely visible in the dim light filtering through the window. "Xavier," she whispered urgently. Together they pried up the loose floorboard, revealing a small cavity beneath. Inside was a tin box. Sophia's hands trembled as she lifted it out. The box contained several folded papers and a leather pouch. Xavier held up a match, striking it against the wall to provide light as Sophia unfolded the first document. "It's a survey map," she breathed, "of this property." The map was marked with annotations in her father's handwriting, with one area circled repeatedly near the northern boundary. The next paper was a letter from an assayer's office in Tucson, confirming the presence of a substantial silver deposit. "Silver," Xavier murmured. "That's why Holbrook wants this land so badly." The leather pouch contained several rough silver ore samples, along with a note in Jonathan Vale's handwriting. "For Sophia, your future security." "My father found a silver vein," Sophia said, tears welling in her eyes. "This is what he wanted to leave me." The bedroom door suddenly swung open, light from a kerosene lamp spilling into the room. A burly man stood in the doorway, pistol drawn. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look what we have here, the Vale girl back from the dead." His eyes shifted to Xavier. "And she brought company." Xavier moved with blinding speed, knocking the lamp from the man's hand. The room plunged into darkness as Xavier tackled the intruder. Sophia scrambled to gather the papers and pouch, shoving them into her dress pocket as sounds of struggle filled the small room. A second man appeared in the doorway. "Jenkins, what the hell is going on?" Sophia grabbed the nearest object, her father's heavy wooden walking stick, leaning against the wall, and swung it with all her might. It connected with the second man's head with a satisfying crack, sending him stumbling backward. Xavier had managed to subdue the first man, pressing a knee into his chest as he delivered a final, decisive blow that rendered him unconscious. He looked up at Sophia, surprise evident in his expression. "Nice swing," he commented, getting to his feet. "We need to go. Now." They fled through the back door, racing for the cover of darkness. Behind them, more voices shouted in alarm. A shot rang out, the bullet splintering the wood of a fence post as they passed. They ran until their lungs burned, finally reaching the ridge where Xavier had left his horse. The stallion was still there, pawing nervously at the ground. "Did you get the papers?" Xavier asked as they mounted. "Yes," Sophia gasped, still breathless from their escape. "It's silver. A rich vein, according to the assayer's report." "That explains everything," Xavier said grimly, urging his horse forward. "Holbrook's been buying land all through this area. He must have known or suspected there were silver deposits." "Where are we going now?" Sophia asked, holding tightly to Xavier as the horse galloped through the night. "Back to my cabin. It's the only safe place until we figure out our next move." They rode hard for over an hour, taking a circuitous route to throw off any potential pursuit. By the time they reached Xavier's canyon hideaway, Sophia was exhausted, her body aching from the unaccustomed hours on horseback and the tension of their escape. Inside the cabin, Xavier bolted the door and quickly built up the fire. Sophia sank into a chair, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of the night's events. "We know what my father found now," she said, spreading the papers on the table. "But how does this help us against Holbrook?" Xavier studied the survey map intently. This vein doesn't just run under your father's property, he said, tracing a line with his finger. According to this, it extends north under my old family land, the land Holbrook stole after killing my parents. So he's known about the silver all along, Sophia realized. That's why he wanted both properties. And why he was willing to kill for them. Xavier's jaw tightened. We have proof now, proof of his motive. But not proof of his crimes, Sophia pointed out. These papers show why he wanted the land, but not that he murdered anyone. Xavier paced the small room, his mind clearly racing. The territorial governor is coming to Whispering Creek next week for the Founders' Day celebration, he said suddenly. Holbrook's been planning it for months, a chance to show off his town. So if we can present our evidence to the governor, the silver discovery, the pattern of land acquisitions, the suspicious deaths he'd have to investigate. Xavier turned to face her. It's our best chance. You're suggesting we walk right into Whispering Creek, right under Holbrook's nose? Yes, Xavier's eyes gleamed with determination, but not as fugitives, as a legally married couple claiming their rightful property. He'll try to kill us both, Sophia protested. Not in front of the governor and half the territory. Holbrook has maintained power because he keeps his criminal activities hidden. He presents himself as a respectable businessman. Xavier sat beside her, his expression earnest. This is our chance, Sophia, perhaps our only chance. Sophia studied his face, the determined set of his jaw, the intensity in his blue eyes, the scar that testified to his own suffering at Holbrook's hands. She had known this man for barely a day, yet they were bound now by law, by circumstance, and by a common enemy. All right, she said finally. We'll confront Holbrook at the Founders' Day celebration, but what do we do until then? We prepare, Xavier answered. And we stay alive. The days that followed established a strange domestic routine in Xavier's cabin. They organized their evidence, wrote detailed accounts of what they had witnessed, and planned their approach to the governor. Xavier also insisted on teaching Sophia how to handle a firearm, just in case, he said grimly. Widen your stance, he instructed, standing behind her as she aimed at a row of bottles he'd set up outside the cabin. And don't hold your breath when you squeeze the trigger. Sophia focused on the center bottle, trying to ignore the warmth of Xavier's hands as he adjusted her grip on the revolver. She fired, missing the bottle by inches. Better, he said. Try again. By the fifth shot, she managed to hit one of the bottles, sending glass shards flying. She turned to Xavier with a triumphant smile, surprised to find him looking at her with an expression that wasn't merely approval. There was something more, something that made her heart beat faster. He cleared his throat, stepping away. Good, that's enough for today. The physical closeness necessitated by their situation, sharing meals, planning together over the small table, the occasional accidental touch created an undeniable tension between them. Sophia found herself noticing things about Xavier. The way the corner of his mouth quirked up when he was amused, how his hands moved with surprising grace for such a rugged man, the softness that sometimes entered his eyes when he looked at her. For his part, Xavier seemed increasingly uncomfortable with their proximity. He was unfailingly polite but maintained a careful distance whenever possible. Each night, he insisted on sleeping by the fire while Sophia took the bedroom, despite her protests that he should take turns sleeping in his own bed. On the third night, a violent thunderstorm rolled through the canyon. Sophia woke to a tremendous crash as lightning struck nearby. The cabin's walls seemed to shake with each thunderclap. Unable to go back to sleep, she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and ventured into the main room. Xavier sat by the fire, a book open on his lap, though his gaze was fixed on the flames rather than the pages. He looked up as she entered. "Storm wake you?" he asked. Sophia nodded, pulling her blanket tighter. "I've never liked thunder. Even as a child, it frightened me. It's just noise," Xavier said, but his tone was gentle, not dismissive. "I know." She sat in the chair opposite him. "What are you reading?" He closed the book, revealing the cover. The complete works of William Shakespeare. You surprise me, Mr. Stone, Sophia said with a small smile. I wouldn't have taken you for a devotee of the bard. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father, Xavier explained. She made sure I was well read, even out here in the wilderness. A wistful expression crossed his face. She would have liked you, would she? Sophia asked softly. Yes, she always said education and determination were the most important qualities in a person. You have both. The compliment warmed her. Tell me about them, your parents. Xavier was quiet for so long that Sophia thought he might not answer. Then he began to speak, haltingly at first, then with increasing fluency. He told her about his father, a former cavalry officer who had settled in Arizona to raise horses, about his mother, who had established a small school in their front room, about the home they had built together and the dreams they had for the future. They were good people, he finished, his voice rough with emotion. They didn't deserve what happened to them. Neither did you, Sophia said gently. The firelight illuminated the scar on his face. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers lightly tracing its path from temple to jaw. Xavier went very still beneath her touch. It's ugly, he said quietly. No, Sophia replied. It's part of your story, part of who you are. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them. The careful distance Xavier had maintained suddenly collapsed. He caught her hand in his, pressing it against his cheek. Sophia, he said, her name almost a question. The thunder crashed outside, but Sophia barely noticed it now. She leaned forward, drawn by something stronger than fear or caution. Their lips met in a kiss, nothing like the perfunctory one they had shared at their wedding. This was real, warm, alive with unexpected feeling. Xavier pulled back first, confusion evident in his expression. I'm sorry, he said. That was inappropriate. We are married, Sophia pointed out, her heart still racing. On paper, he reminded her. A temporary arrangement. Yes, of course. Sophia withdrew her hand, suddenly embarrassed by her impulsiveness. I should go back to bed. Sophia, Xavier began, but whatever he intended to say remained unspoken as she retreated to the bedroom, closing the door firmly behind her. Sleep eluded her as she replayed the kiss in her mind. It had been impulsive, perhaps foolish, yet she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Somehow, in the space of a few days, Xavier Stone had become more than just a convenient protector. He had become someone she genuinely cared for. But their arrangement was temporary, as he had pointed out. Once they confronted Holbrook and secured her inheritance, they would go their separate ways. Xavier had made it clear from the beginning that he had no interest in a real marriage, and what about her own feelings? Until a week ago, Sophia had imagined herself eventually returning to Boston, perhaps finding a suitable husband among her father's business associates. She had never envisioned a life in this harsh territory, married to a scarred recluse with a traumatic past. Yet something had changed. The danger they faced together, the quiet evenings by the fire, the growing understanding between them, it all combined to create feelings Sophia had never experienced before. Morning brought awkwardness between them. Xavier was more formal than usual, addressing her as Mrs. Stone rather than Sophia as he prepared breakfast. The intimacy of the previous night seemed to have erected new barriers rather than breaking down existing ones. They spent the day in final preparations for their journey to Whispering Creek. The governor was due to arrive in 2 days. They would need to leave at first light tomorrow to reach the town in time for the celebrations. Once we're in town, we'll need to stay at the hotel, Xavier said, carefully cleaning his rifle. We'll present ourselves as a married couple returning to claim our property. Holbrook won't dare move against us openly, not with the governor present. And if he tries something less open, Sophia asked, Xavier's expression hardened. That's why we'll be armed and vigilant. We don't separate, not for a moment. As the day wore on, Sophia found herself increasingly anxious about their plan. So much could go wrong. What if the governor dismissed their evidence? What if Holbrook managed to isolate them despite their precautions? What if you're thinking too loud? Xavier said, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. I can practically hear the worry from here. I can't help it, Sophia admitted. Tomorrow we're walking into the lion's den. Xavier set aside his rifle and came to sit beside her at the table. We have evidence, we have the law on our side, and we have surprise. Holbrook thinks you're either dead or fled. He certainly doesn't expect you to return with a husband. And if that's not enough, Xavier hesitated, then covered her hand with his. Then we have each other, he said simply. Whatever else this marriage may or may not be, we're partners in this. The warmth of his touch and the steadiness in his voice calmed her. Partners, she repeated, turning her hand to clasp his. I can accept that. That evening, as Sophia packed the few belongings she had brought with her, Xavier appeared in the bedroom doorway with something in his hands. You should have this, he said, extending a small wooden box toward her. It was my mother's. Inside the box lay a simple silver band set with a small, deep blue stone. It's beautiful, Sophia said, lifting it carefully. If we're to present ourselves as a proper married couple, you should have a ring, Xavier explained, his tone practical. This was my mother's wedding band. The gesture touched Sophia deeply. Are you sure? It must be precious to you. It is, but so is our mission. Xavier took the ring and gently slid it onto her finger. It fit surprisingly well. There. Now you truly look the part of Mrs. Stone. His hand lingered on hers for a moment. Sophia looked up, finding his blue eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Xavier, she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. We should get some rest, he said abruptly, releasing her hand. Tomorrow will be a long day. As he turned to leave, Sophia called after him. Wait. When he paused, she continued, Would you stay, just to talk? I don't think I can sleep yet. Xavier hesitated, then nodded. They sat on the edge of the bed, side by side but not touching. Sophia twisted the ring on her finger, trying to find the words for what she wanted to express. I want to thank you, she said finally. For everything you've done. You didn't have to help me, didn't have to marry me. You could have sent me away that first night. I gave Parker my word, Xavier replied. Is that the only reason? He was silent for a long moment. No, he admitted. Not anymore. The simple acknowledgement hung between them, neither willing to explore its full implications with the danger of the next day looming before them. Whatever happens tomorrow, Sophia said, I'm glad I met you, Xavier Stone. And I you, Sophia Vale, he replied, then corrected himself. Sophia Stone. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their lives before they met Sophia's childhood in Boston. Her education at a prestigious women's academy, her complicated relationship with her father. Xavier spoke of his years alone in the canyon, the skills he had developed, the quiet life he had built for himself. At some point, exhaustion overtook them both. Sophia woke just before dawn to find herself still fully clothed, lying beside Xavier on top of the bedcovers. His arm was draped protectively around her waist, his breathing deep and even in sleep. Despite the apprehension about the day ahead, Sophia felt a strange sense of peace in that moment. Carefully, so as not to wake him, she studied his face in repose. The scar seemed less severe somehow, the hard lines of his features softened by sleep. This man, who had begun as a stranger and reluctant protector, had become something else entirely to her, something she wasn't quite ready to name. Xavier's eyes opened, finding hers. For a moment neither spoke, caught in the intimacy of the moment. Then reality intruded. It's time, he said quietly. The ride to Whispering Creek was tense and largely silent. They traveled openly now, taking the main road rather than the back trails. Xavier wore his best clothes, a clean black shirt, dark trousers, and a vest that had seen better days but was still presentable. Sophia had washed and pressed her violet dress as best she could, and wore her hair neatly pinned beneath a small hat that Xavier had somehow procured for her. They looked, Sophia thought, like any frontier couple heading to town for a celebration. Except for the revolver hidden in the folds of her skirt and the rifle strapped to Xavier's saddle, and the incriminating documents secured in an oilskin packet inside her bodice. Whispering Creek came into view around midday. The town had been decorated for the Founders' Day celebration, with bunting and flags hanging from buildings along the main street. People were already gathering, dressed in their finest clothes. A makeshift stage had been erected in front of the town hall, presumably for the governor's address. "There's Holbrook," Xavier murmured, nodding toward a portly man in an expensive suit directing workers near the stage. "And he's just spotted us." Sophia followed his gaze. Mayor Holbrook had indeed frozen in place, staring at them with undisguised shock. Then his eyes narrowed, and he quickly turned away, speaking urgently to a man beside him, the same gunman who had shot Sheriff Parker. "He doesn't look happy to see me alive," Sophia observed. "Or me back in town," Xavier added grimly. "Come on, let's get to the hotel before he decides to do something about it." They dismounted in front of the Whispering Creek Hotel, a two-story building that represented the town's aspirations to refinement. Xavier helped Sophia down, maintaining the appearance of a solicitous husband while his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. Inside, the hotel clerk's eyes widened at the sight of Xavier. "Mr. Stone, we weren't expecting. That is, we'd heard you'd left the territory." "Rumors of my departure were exaggerated," Xavier replied coolly. "My wife and I require a room for a few days." "Wife?" the clerk echoed, looking at Sophia in confusion. Xavier placed their marriage certificate on the counter. "We were married last week." Judge Abernathy performed the ceremony in Copper Gulch. The clerk examined the document with obvious amazement. "I see. Well, congratulations are in order, I suppose." He turned to the key rack. "Room 204 is available. It has a nice view of the street." "Perfect," Xavier said, taking the key. "We'd like to freshen up before the governor's arrival." As they climbed the stairs, Sophia whispered, "News of our marriage will be all over town within the hour." "Good," Xavier replied. "The more public our presence, the harder it will be for Holbrook to move against us." Their room was small but clean, with a double bed, washstand, and window overlooking the bustling Main Street. Xavier immediately checked the window latch and examined the walls for any unexpected openings. "Paranoid?" Sophia asked, though she understood his caution. "Realistic," he corrected. "Holbrook will try something. The question is what and when." They didn't have to wait long to find out. They had barely settled in when a knock came at their door. Xavier motioned for Sophia to stand aside as he drew his revolver and approached the door. "Who is it?" he called. "Message for Mr. and Mrs. Stone," came the reply. Xavier opened the door cautiously, keeping his body between the messenger and Sophia. A young boy stood in the hallway holding an envelope. "Mayor Holbrook sends his compliments," the boy recited. "He requests the pleasure of your company at dinner this evening before the governor's reception." Xavier took the envelope, handing the boy a coin. After the child departed, he opened the message and read it aloud. "Mr. and Mrs. Stone, I was most surprised to learn of your return to Whispering Creek, and even more surprised by news of your recent nuptials. I would be honored if you would join me for a private dinner at my home at 6 o'clock this evening. We have much to discuss regarding property matters that concern us all. Yours sincerely, Edward Holbrook, Mayor." "It's a trap," Sophia said immediately. "Of course it is," Xavier agreed, "but one we might be able to use to our advantage. If we can get Holbrook to incriminate himself, perhaps even record his threats. And if he simply has us shot the moment we enter his house," Xavier shook his head. "Too obvious, especially with the governor arriving tomorrow. He'll try something more subtle." He tapped the letter thoughtfully. "We should accept. Are you certain?" "No," Xavier admitted, "but confronting Holbrook directly on our terms rather than his might be our best chance to expose him." Sophia took a deep breath. "Then I suppose we're having dinner with the mayor." They spent the afternoon finalizing their strategy. Xavier wrote a polite acceptance to Holbrook's invitation, while Sophia organized their evidence and prepared what she would say to the governor. By the time evening approached, they were as ready as they could be. Sophia changed into her only other dress, a deep blue one that had been her mother's, carefully preserved and brought with her from Boston. As she pinned up her hair, she caught Xavier watching her in the mirror. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," he said quickly, then reconsidered. "Just. You look beautiful." The simple compliment brought warmth to her cheeks. "Thank you." Xavier had also made an effort with his appearance, having visited the barber for a proper shave and haircut. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his clothes brushed clean. The scar remained prominent on his face, but Sophia had long since ceased to notice it except as a part of him. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "As I'll ever be," she replied, taking it. They walked together to Holbrook's mansion at the end of the main street, a ostentatious two-story structure with a columned porch and manicured gardens. It stood as a physical manifestation of the mayor's power and wealth, much of it acquired, they now knew, through violence and theft. A butler admitted them, leading them to an elaborately furnished parlor where Mayor Holbrook waited. He was a corpulent man in his 50s, expensively dressed, with small, calculating eyes and a forced smile that never reached them. "Mr. and Mrs. Stone," he greeted them, his voice oily with false congeniality. "How delightful that you could join me this evening." "Mayor Holbrook," Xavier acknowledged stiffly. "Please sit down." Holbrook gestured to a pair of chairs. "We have much to discuss before dinner is served." As they sat, Sophia noted that Holbrook's gunman stood by the door, watching them with undisguised hostility. Another man, whom she didn't recognize, lingered near the window. "I must say," Holbrook began, seating himself opposite them, "your marriage came as quite a surprise. I wasn't aware that you two even knew each other." "Life is full of surprises," Xavier replied evenly, "as is death." Holbrook's smile tightened. "Indeed, speaking of surprises, Miss Vale, forgive me, Mrs. Stone, your sudden departure from town caused quite a stir. Especially coming so soon after poor Sheriff Parker's unfortunate accident." "It wasn't an accident," Sophia said coolly. "It was murder, ordered by you and carried out by your man there." She nodded toward the gunman. "My dear lady, what an extraordinary accusation." Holbrook exclaimed, though his eyes had hardened to flint. "Grief can often distort one's perception of events." "My perception is quite clear," Sophia retorted, "as is my memory." Holbrook turned his attention to Xavier. "And you, Stone, I thought we'd seen the last of you years ago. Yet here you are, not only back in my town, but married to a woman whose property adjoins your family's former land." He leaned forward. "Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" "Not at all," Xavier replied. "Sophia needed protection, I needed justice. Our marriage serves both purposes." "Justice?" Holbrook repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "For what exactly?" "For my parents' murders, for the theft of their land, for all the others you've driven off their properties or killed to expand your holdings." Xavier's voice remained steady, but Sophia could feel the tension radiating from him. Holbrook laughed, though the sound held no humor. "You always did have an overactive imagination, Stone. Your parents died in a tragic house fire. The coroner's report was quite clear on that." "A fire set by your men," Xavier countered. "Prove it," Holbrook challenged. Then, abruptly changing tack, he turned back to Sophia. "Mrs. Stone, I understand your father left you in rather dire financial circumstances. His debts are substantial. I remain willing to purchase the Vale Ranch for a fair price, enough to cover those debts, and provide you with a modest sum to start a new life elsewhere." "My father's property is no longer for sale," Sophia replied firmly. "And as a married woman, I now have a year to settle any outstanding debts, as you well know." "Ah yes, the convenient marriage." Holbrook's smile became a sneer. "One might almost suspect it was arranged specifically to circumvent the law." "We have a valid marriage certificate," Xavier said. "Judge Abernathy performed the ceremony himself." "Certificates can be challenged," Holbrook observed, "especially when there are questions about the authenticity of the union." Sophia felt a chill at the implied threat. "Our marriage is legitimate in every way." "Is it?" Holbrook raised an eyebrow. My sources tell me you spent exactly one night in Copper Gulch before riding back into the wilderness together. Hardly time for a proper courtship. The territorial court might well view such a hasty arrangement with suspicion, particularly when there are significant financial implications. Before either of them could respond, the butler appeared at the doorway. "Dinner is served, sir." "Excellent," Holbrook said, rising. "Shall we continue our discussion over a meal? I've had my chef prepare something special for the occasion." The dining room was as ostentatious as the rest of the house, with a long mahogany table set with fine china and silver. Holbrook took his place at the head, with Xavier and Sophia seated across from each other midway down the table. The gunman and the other man positioned themselves near the door, not joining them at the table. As the first course was served a soup that Sophia merely pretended to taste, Holbrook resumed his probing. "Tell me, Stone, what do you plan to do now that you've returned? Reclaim your old cabin? Or perhaps you intend to live on your wife's property, assuming she manages to keep it?" "Our plans are our own," Xavier replied tersely. Of course. Holbrook sampled his soup with apparent enjoyment. "Though I wonder if you're aware of certain developments regarding the Vale property. There's been a survey recently, you see." Sophia and Xavier exchanged a glance. "What kind of survey?" she asked. "A mineral survey," Holbrook said casually. "Standard procedure for properties in this region. Quite interesting results as it happens." "I imagine so," Xavier said, "especially if silver was found." Holbrook's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "You seem well informed." "We are," Sophia confirmed. "We know all about the silver vein that runs through my father's property and the Stone family land. We know that's why you've been so determined to acquire both parcels." "And we know," Xavier added, "that you've been eliminating anyone who stands in your way, my parents, Sheriff Parker, Jonathan Vale." "My father died of pneumonia," Sophia interjected, "or so I was told, but now I wonder if he had help with his illness once he discovered the silver." Holbrook set down his spoon, his pretense of geniality evaporating. "You make serious accusations without a shred of proof." "We have proof," Xavier contradicted him. "Enough to interest the territorial governor when he arrives tomorrow." "The governor is a personal friend," Holbrook said dismissively. "He won't listen to unfounded accusations from a scarred recluse and a desperate woman clinging to a worthless inheritance." "The inheritance isn't worthless," Sophia countered, "as you well know, and our evidence isn't unfounded. We have the mineral survey, documentation of your land acquisitions following the silver vein, and eyewitness testimony about Sheriff Parker's murder." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Holbrook's expression. He recovered quickly, his face hardening into a mask of malice. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "You will not see the governor tomorrow. In fact, you will not see tomorrow at all." He nodded to his men. "I had hoped to resolve this amicably, but you leave me no choice." The gunman moved toward them, hand going to his weapon. Xavier tensed, ready to leap to his feet when an unexpected interruption came. The front door burst open with a crash. Heavy footsteps approached, and the dining room door swung wide to reveal Judge Abernathy, accompanied by several armed men wearing territorial marshal badges. "Edward Holbrook," the judge announced formally, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, land fraud, and obstruction of justice." Holbrook's face drained of color. "This is absurd. You have no authority." "I have every authority," Abernathy cut him off. "As circuit judge and acting representative of the territorial governor." He turned to Xavier and Sophia. "Are you both unharmed?" "We're fine," Xavier assured him, getting to his feet. "But how did you know?" "After performing your wedding, I became curious about the circumstances," the judge explained. "I did some investigating, spoke to witnesses in Copper Gulch who saw what happened to Sheriff Parker. Then I telegraphed the governor about my suspicions." He gestured to the marshals. "He sent these men ahead of his arrival to assist in apprehending Holbrook if my suspicions proved correct." The mayor's gunman made a move for his weapon, but one of the marshals was faster, disarming him before he could draw. The other man by the window tried to flee but was quickly subdued. "Your letter reached me this morning," Abernathy continued, addressing Xavier and Sophia. "Your evidence, combined with what I had already uncovered, was most persuasive. The governor has authorized a full investigation." Holbrook, seeing his situation deteriorating rapidly, made one last attempt. "This is all a misunderstanding. I've been a pillar of this community for 20 years. Save it for your trial, Holbrook," Judge Abernathy said grimly. "You'll have ample opportunity to present your defense, which is more than you gave to your victims." As the marshals led Holbrook and his men away, Sophia felt a wave of dizzying relief wash over her. Xavier came to her side, placing a supportive hand on her arm. "It's over," he said softly. "He can't hurt anyone else now." Judge Abernathy approached them as the room cleared. "The governor will still want to speak with you tomorrow," he said. "Your testimony will be crucial in ensuring Holbrook faces justice for all his crimes, not just the recent ones." "We'll be ready," Sophia assured him. "Good." The judge's expression softened. "I must admit, when you two came to me asking to be married, I had my doubts about the sincerity of your arrangement. But seeing you together now, I think perhaps fate had a hand in bringing you to each other." With that cryptic observation, he bid them good night and followed the marshals out, leaving Xavier and Sophia alone in Holbrook's opulent dining room. "We did it," Sophia said, wonder in her voice. "We actually did it. Justice for my parents," Xavier murmured, "and for your father. And for everyone else Holbrook has harmed over the years." They left the mansion together, walking slowly back toward the hotel through the festive town. Whispering Creek's citizens, unaware of the dramatic arrest that had just occurred, continued their preparations for the next day's celebration. Tomorrow they would learn the truth about their mayor, but for tonight, Xavier and Sophia kept the news to themselves, savoring their private victory. In their hotel room, Xavier poured them each a small glass of whiskey from a bottle he'd purchased at the saloon. "To justice," he proposed, raising his glass. "To justice," Sophia echoed, touching her glass to his. The liquor burned pleasantly as she sipped it. A comfortable silence fell between them as they sat by the window, watching the town's activities below. Sophia was acutely aware that with Holbrook's arrest, the immediate danger had passed, which meant the primary purpose of their marriage was now fulfilled. "What happens now?" she finally asked, voicing the question that had been hovering between them. Xavier looked at her, his expression unreadable in the dim lamplight. "That depends," he said carefully. On what you want, Sophia." She twisted his mother's ring around her finger. "When we married, you said it would be temporary. That we would get an annulment once Holbrook was dealt with." "I did say that," Xavier acknowledged. "It seemed appropriate at the time." "And now," Xavier set down his glass and turned to face her fully. "Now I'm not so sure that's what I want." Sophia's heart quickened. "What do you want, Xavier?" He reached out, taking her hand in his. "These past few days with you, they've changed something in me. I've been alone for so long, convinced that solitude was my only option after what happened to my family. I built walls around myself, retreated to that canyon, shut out the world. And now," Sophia prompted when he paused, "now I find myself thinking about a different future." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, one with companionship, purpose, maybe even happiness. "With me?" Sophia asked, needing to hear him say it. "Yes," Xavier admitted. "With you, if that's something you might want too." Sophia thought about her life before coming to Arizona, the structure, the predictability, the safety of Boston society. Then she thought about the past week, the danger, yes, but also the exhilaration of fighting for justice, of finding strength she hadn't known she possessed, of discovering a connection with this complex, honorable man before her. "I came west expecting to stay only long enough to settle my father's affairs," she said slowly. "I never imagined finding a home here or someone to share it with. And now," Xavier echoed her earlier question, "now I can't imagine going back east, Sophia said, her voice growing more confident as she recognized the truth in her words. Not when everything I want is here. The tension in Xavier's face eased, replaced by a tentative hope. You mean that? In answer, Sophia leaned forward and kissed him, not the hesitant kiss they had shared by the fire, but one filled with certainty and promise. Xavier's arms came around her, drawing her closer as he returned the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally parted, Sophia rested her forehead against his. I mean it, she whispered. I want to make this marriage real, Xavier. I want to build a life with you. A genuine smile, the first full, unguarded smile she had seen from him, transformed his face. The scar that had once seemed so defining now appeared merely as one element of a countenance filled with warmth and hope. Then let's do exactly that, Mrs. Stone, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Together. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the sky a perfect azure expanse above Whispering Creek. Sophia woke in Xavier's arms, their night together having sealed the transformation of their paper marriage into something real and precious. They dressed carefully for their meeting with the governor, who had arrived late the previous night and was receiving visitors at the town hall. News of Holbrook's arrest had spread through town like wildfire, creating an atmosphere of confusion and speculation. Ready? Xavier asked, offering Sophia his arm as they prepared to leave their room. Ready, she confirmed, taking it with a confidence that surprised even her. They walked together through Whispering Creek, heads held high as townsfolk stared and whispered. The couple made in striking pair, Xavier tall and imposing despite his scarred face, Sophia elegant and poised in her blue dress, her hand resting securely on her husband's arm. At the town hall, they were immediately ushered into a private meeting with the governor, a distinguished man with silver hair and piercing eyes. Judge Abernathy was already present, along with the marshals who had arrested Holbrook. Mr. and Mrs. Stone, the governor greeted them. Judge Abernathy has told me some of your story, but I would like to hear it from you directly. For the next hour, Xavier and Sophia took turns explaining everything from the murders of Xavier's parents 5 years ago to Sheriff Parker's recent killing. From Jonathan Vale's silver discovery to their marriage of necessity that had become something far more meaningful. The governor listened attentively, asking occasional questions but mostly allowing them to tell their tale in full. When they had finished, he nodded gravely. I've known for some time that there were irregularities in Whispering Creek's governance, he said. But the extent of Holbrook's crimes is far worse than I suspected. He turned to one of the marshals. Ensure that Mr. Holbrook remains securely detained until his trial. Given the severity of the charges and his influence in this area, he is to be transported to Tucson immediately. Yes, sir, the marshal replied. The governor returned his attention to Xavier and Sophia. As for you two, I believe some restitution is in order. Mr. Stone, your family's land was wrongfully taken from you. I will ensure that the deed is returned to your name with all legal rights and privileges restored. Thank you, Governor, Xavier said, his voice thick with emotion. That would mean a great deal to me, Mrs. Stone. Your father's property and all claims to the mineral rights thereon are confirmed as your legal inheritance. Furthermore, the territory will ensure that any legitimate debts against the estate are properly assessed, without the inflation Holbrook had arranged. We are most grateful, Sophia replied, squeezing Xavier's hand. There is one more matter, the governor continued. Whispering Creek now finds itself without a sheriff or a mayor. The town needs leadership, honest leadership, to recover from Holbrook's corruption. He looked meaningfully at Xavier. Mr. Stone, Judge Abernathy speaks highly of your character and your sense of justice. Would you consider accepting an appointment as interim sheriff until a proper election can be held? Xavier looked stunned. Me. Governor, I've been living as a recluse for 5 years. I'm hardly the most popular man in town. Which is precisely why you're the right man for the job, the governor countered. You have no ties to Holbrook's regime, you understand the law, and you've demonstrated extraordinary courage in standing up for what's right, even at great personal risk. Xavier glanced at Sophia, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, encouraging him. I would be honored to serve, he said finally, with my wife's support. Excellent, the governor said, rising from his chair. Then let us go address the townspeople. They deserve to know the truth about what has happened here and to meet their new sheriff. The Founders' Day celebration became instead a day of reckoning and renewal for Whispering Creek. From the steps of the town hall, the governor informed the assembled citizens of Holbrook's crimes and arrest. There were gasps of shock, murmurs of disbelief, and from some who had suffered under the mayor's regime, expressions of vindication. When the governor introduced Xavier Stone as the new sheriff, the reaction was mixed confusion, uncertainty, even some hostility from those who had believed Holbrook's lies about him. But when Xavier stepped forward, Sophia at his side, and spoke simply and honestly about his hopes for bringing true justice to the town, the mood began to shift. I know many of you have questions about me, about my past, Xavier said. Some of you may have believed I was guilty of terrible things. I can't blame you for that. Holbrook's influence ran deep. But I stand before you today not seeking revenge for those misunderstandings, but offering a fresh start, for all of us. A tentative applause began, growing stronger as Xavier continued to speak about his vision for a town governed by fairness rather than fear. My wife and I, he concluded, drawing Sophia forward, are committed to making Whispering Creek the kind of community where honest people can thrive. Where no one needs to fear that their land or their lives will be taken on a powerful man's whim. I ask for your support, not for my sake, but for the sake of the town we all call home. This time, the applause was genuine and widespread. As they stepped back, Sophia whispered, "They're beginning to believe in you." "In us," Xavier corrected her, his eyes filled with a happiness she had never seen there before. "Everything I am now, everything I hope to be, is because of us." The celebration continued into the evening, transformed from a commemoration of a false history to a genuine new beginning. Xavier and Sophia moved among the townspeople, listening to concerns, answering questions, beginning the long process of healing the community's wounds. As night fell and lanterns illuminated the town square, Xavier led Sophia away from the festivities to a quiet spot behind the church. In the peaceful darkness, he took both her hands in his. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice solemn. "We're already married," Sophia reminded him with a smile. "Yes, but not as it should have been." Xavier dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Sophia Vale Stone, now that we are safe, now that we have a future, will you marry me again? Not for legal protection or strategic advantage, but because I love you with every part of my heart and soul." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes at the unexpected declaration. "You love me, more than I ever thought possible," Xavier confessed. "You brought light back into my life when I thought I would live forever in darkness. You gave me purpose, courage, hope." He kissed her hands. "I know it's soon, that we've known each other only days, but—" "Yes," Sophia interrupted, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, Xavier, I will marry you again. And again, if you ask, because I love you too." Their kiss sealed this second proposal, one made not from necessity but from pure, undiluted love. When they parted, Xavier's expression was one of wonder and joy. "When?" he asked. "When shall we renew our vows?" "As soon as possible," Sophia replied without hesitation. "Perhaps once things in town have settled a bit. A month from now." "A month it is," Xavier agreed. "And this time we'll do it properly with the whole town invited." "A new beginning," Sophia said, "for all of us." 1 year later, Whispering Creek had transformed. Under Sheriff Stone's leadership, the town had shed its corrupt past and emerged as a model community. The silver mine on the combined Stone properties operated fairly, with decent wages for the miners had brought prosperity without exploitation. Xavier and Sophia had built a new home on the border between their two properties. symbolically uniting the lands that Hallbrook had coveted. The house was spacious yet welcoming, with wide windows that captured the magnificent desert sunsets and bookshelves filled with volumes both practical and poetic. Their second wedding, held exactly 1 month after Xavier's moonlit proposal, had indeed included the entire town. Judge Abernathy had returned to perform the ceremony, his face beaming with satisfaction as he witnessed the completion of the journey he had inadvertently helped begin. On the anniversary of that second wedding, Xavier and Sophia sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun sink below the distant mesas. Their hands were intertwined, her head resting comfortably against his shoulder. "Any regrets?" Xavier asked, raising their joined hands to kiss her fingers. "Only that it took danger and desperation to bring us together," Sophia replied, "though I wouldn't change a moment of it now, nor would I." Xavier's voice was thoughtful. "The law may have made you my wife first, but it was my heart that made you my life." Sophia smiled, turning to face him. "I have news," she said, her eyes shining. "What is it?" She guided his hand to rest against her abdomen. "Our family is growing. The doctor confirmed it yesterday." Xavier's expression transformed with astonishment and joy. "A baby. We're going to have a baby." "Yes," Sophia laughed at his wonderment. "In about 7 months, Sheriff Stone." He gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying emotions too powerful for words. When he finally pulled back, tears glistened in his eyes. "When I think of how close I came to sending you away that first night," he murmured, "of all we would have lost." "But you didn't," Sophia reminded him. "You chose to help me, to marry me, to fight alongside me." "The best decisions of my life," Xavier declared. As darkness settled around them and stars began to appear in the vast Arizona sky, Xavier and Sophia Stone remained on their porch, planning their future, cherishing their present, and marveling at the journey that had brought them together, a journey that had begun with a marriage of necessity, but had transformed into a lifetime of love. The law might have made them husband and wife, but it was their hearts that had made them soulmates, finding in each other the healing, purpose, and passion they had never expected to discover in the wild and unpredictable frontier they now called home.